Welcome to the Block Exploring Podcast, your first step into the world of crypto and blockchain. The Block Exploring Podcast is your one-stop place to find quick, clear, and unbiased information on everything in the crypto space. Our goal is to help you grow familiar with the crypto space by growing along with us as we go on our crypto journeys. Follow @Block Exploring on Twitter for our newest uploads and our publishing schedule. We, here at Block Exploring, are crypto enthusiasts working hard towards becoming experts. Today's podcast is presented by co-hosts Tommy and Elias. Find us on Twitter under @SabaiSquared and @OtokoCrypto. Right now you can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Before we start the episode, we would like to inform you that we are not financial advisors. Therefore, nothing said in this podcast should be considered financial advice. Always contact your financial advisor before making any investment. With that said, sit back and enjoy today's podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 10 of News Bytes on the Block Exploring Podcast. I'm here with Tommy. What's up, Tommy?
Hey Elias. Hey Block Explorers, what's happening?
Yeah, so this past week, it's been fairly stable, I feel like. We had a bit of a dip on Wednesday, and we've been recovering from that. Let's just discuss the state of the market today and some regulation and some tech development. So Biden, he's going to be talking at the G7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a pretty big development that now on like one of the biggest international stages, cryptocurrency is a hot topic,
Mm-hmm.
Then there's this like concerted intention that these world leaders are going to talk about cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or just cryptocurrencies in general. Yeah, and I think that's going to be huge for cryptocurrencies in general, whether it's good or bad. Like will be seen at the time or a bit after, but I think it'll have huge ramifications for the market and the future of cryptocurrencies in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it can be like a double-edged sword, like there are a bunch of countries right now, like in El Salvador is happening, that are saying, hey, crypto is a good thing, we should start adopting it. But then also there's kind of reports around this speech for the G7 where it's going to be, Biden's going to talk about how ransomware and all these kind of cybersecurity threats are being enabled through crypto and through an unregulated payment platform, the way we see like Bitcoin and all these kinds of cryptos used. And on the one hand, it might bring a lot of awareness and also a lot of regulatory clarity, I think. So these are all the things that we're not regulating as of now, and we should be regulating. That could be extremely positive, but what it also could cause is just kind of a, kind of a boomer response of, we should just, put it on ice.
Yeah, boomers just sesh on cryptocurrency. I think a lot of this fear on enablement of ransomware and hacking has been heightened by, as of recent, there have been some hacks that have taken place in the United States, where these hackers, as ransom, they wanted cryptocurrencies, but apparently the FBI actually managed to get back all the cryptocurrencies which these hackers made off with, because apparently, so from what I understand, these were really good hackers, right? Because they managed to hack whatever they were trying to hack, but they were just not crypto savvy, in that they wanted the crypto, they got the crypto that they got sent, they sent it to a centralized exchange. So it was very easy for FBI to just go to the exchange. Exchange was just like, okay, so these are the coins that got hacked, because it's this classic, not your keys, not your cryptos. So their keys were obviously in the hands of the centralized exchange, and that got settled very quickly. but it's a more savvy hacker in the realm of crypto, which is kind of weird. If you're a really good hacker, I feel like you would maybe expect that this person or this group is more crypto savvy as well.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
I guess not. But I can understand why world leaders would be worried about this, but it's also like, if I don't know what's a good example, but I feel like it's not that crypto enables ransomware. I feel like that's a big stretch that's being made.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think a lot of people think these ransomware attacks, they're just using crypto because it's hard to trace, blah blah blah. But there are tons of people that are still, giving up their private keys in kind of like scams, and these kinds of actions are, people. It's usually the person's own actions that lead to these kinds of vulnerabilities in the system. And
right.
Yeah, sure, there's hacks where they, I don't know, exploit bugs or critical errors in code, and that that through that way they steal a lot of personal data and say, okay, we'll pay us in this and this and we'll get away with it. But quite often, especially for like the individual who isn't insured against these kinds of attacks, it's their own actions that kind of lead to this. And you can be as secure as you want. The crypto can be as reliable as you want. It's like just giving up your password to your Gmail. All the security is in place, but if you're giving away the key,
exactly,
it's not the fault of the currency.
There's just a false narrative, I think, in terms of, there's just a lot of politicians now talking about how it's this narrative that cryptocurrencies are only, or Bitcoin is just being used for, illicit activities or, the purchase of, illegal activities. And which is just, time and time again has been proven wrong. And I think it's been stated that maybe these illicit activities only make up maybe 1% of the total transactions or activities that are made on Bitcoin network or any other network. But this is what a lot of politicians feel the need to highlight. And I think it's just a lack of understanding.
I think so too, and especially because Bitcoin is usually the main one they call out for this.
Yeah.
I think if you're a scammer and you say, you know what, I'm gonna rip someone off, I'm gonna use Bitcoin for this kind of transfer or whatever, I think that's the worst crypto you can use, because like the blockchain is completely public. Anyone can just scan what's going on, see where it's being moved. If you look at something like Monero, which already goes into the pseudonymous kind of aspects and the fully anonymous transactions, with a semi-public blockchain, then you get into some territory where tracing it is way harder. And these kinds of the anonymous blockchains, the anonymous cryptos, that's where maybe some regulation should be in place, like the traceability and just stopping illicit activities. But I think pointing at something like Bitcoin is like, it's such a misconception of what it's actually used for.
Yeah, but then again, to go heavily regulate the traceability of these transactions sort of almost defeats the point of their creation and their intended purpose. So there's that one hand where, yes, like I assume, but we both understand there's like this inherent, need that a government feels, or, regulators feel that they need to protect, and prevent certain people or things from happening.
Yeah.
But there's also just maybe a balance that needs to be had, in between, infringing on like the inherent principles of why certain things were created for, and the protection, or it's very difficult when you start getting into this debate about regulation, when the regulators are not making the intentions or making the steps that are necessary to understand the space of which they're trying to to regulate. It's a
Yeah.
different question if regulators are very informed, and then they understand how things should be regulated, as
Yeah.
opposed to not understanding what is the space, what it's about, and having a holistic view of the different stakeholders and their needs and wants and such,
Mm-hmm.
and then just trying to impose regulation down, which I think is why a lot of people are in crypto, because they want to they have certain principles, and they want to do things that are not allowed in such a centralized system.
No, I agree. And what I think is, even in our current, like, fiat systems, we have cash.
Mhm.
And if you look at cash, it's really hard to trace how it, moves through society.
Yeah.
And we're still, it's fully accepted, and there's a purpose for this, because it also puts more power in the hands of the person actually handling the cash. It kind of it gives freedom. A government can't just block your account or something like this.
Right.
Maybe there's an ethical reason why they should be, or whatever. It also prevents, and it protects, and it gives more equity to kind of the individual over the government. Whatever philosophical debates behind that doesn't really matter, but it's there, it's in place.
Mm-hmm.
And crypto does this in a certain way, in a digital setting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's definitely something that should be taken into account. And there's definitely a reason that governments don't like this, because it takes a lot of their power away. And you see this in the regulation, and the fact that there is so little regulation being put out here. Because, if you go, it's very possible for governments to regulate this stuff. It's not like there's a required 10-year waiting period before you can enforce regulation, or before you can draft regulation.
Yeah.
So if you look at like Nixon, like in the 70s, when marijuana became illegalized to a heavier extent, there were like 20 bills being published on this in the span of like half a year. This could be very doable for crypto, but they're not doing it.
Right. Yeah. And it's just a worry, because from what we see, at least from the US, there's just a lot of FUD coming out from different regulators. Like Elizabeth Warren was most recent, hater, I suppose, the community would say, who went on quite a long, speech talking about how focusing solely on, the illicit activities that can be carried out using cryptocurrencies, and focusing heavily on environmental aspects, negative environmental aspects of proof of work, Bitcoin, and some other cryptocurrencies. But never did she even give almost the other side of it. And a lot of what she was, I think what a lot of people were annoyed about was that through what she was saying, she was showing just a broad misunderstanding, or a lack of engagement with the space, and as opposed to trying to appropriately look for appropriate regulation. It just looked more like she's fishing for some political wins, or some brownie points somewhere here or there. But and that's really not what's going to lead towards good legislation towards this towards cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was reading kind of like her statements, an immediate parallel came to my mind, especially about the environmental issues, blah blah blah. Right now we all drive cars. Cars are everywhere. Everyone has access to cars. They're also massive polluters. They're absolutely horrible for the environment in general. But we still, we all have cars, and it's completely legal to own a car. And the only thing that's happening now is that more and more legislation is being made in order to promote sustainable use of cars. It's not like we're saying we shouldn't be using cars because they're not sustainable. We're saying we should form the cars so that they become more sustainable, so that they become, better for the world while
Right.
still maintaining the standards we've set for our modern lives where we have to use cars. Now, the counter argument that's being made against crypto is usually environmental. That's the kind of the mainstream thing that you hear. Oh, proof of work is horrible, Bitcoin is horrible for the environment, don't use it. That's kind of like a dubious standard to hold it to,
Exactly. And if you, even Elon Musk, who's talking about environmentally friendly mining and how there's this pressing need to deal with Bitcoin's energy consumption, which is sure, yes, this is probably something that needs to be dealt with. But even Elon Musk with his cars that need to be charged up, it's being charged up by plugging it through the wall.
Yeah.
You plug your Tesla into the wall, that energy that they use is more likely than not coming from coal. Which what's the difference between plugging your mining rig into the wall as opposed to your Tesla into the wall? It uses the same energy effectively.
No, that's true. But I think that this kind of like this critiquing without improving and this leaving crypto in a regulatory limbo is what kind of like has severely contributed to the way the market is kind of stabilizing in this limbo right now. And I think if you look at like the thing we were talking about before, the death cross, about the Bitcoin being in a death cross kind of situation, I think that kind of adds to it. But then again, this idea of a death cross, like we were saying before, no one knew about, or like most of the people didn't know about, like, I'm
willing to bet a large segment of the community is not well versed in technical analysis, and they've just recently heard like of a few influencers talking about this death cross being printed on the or about to be printed on the Bitcoin chart, and now there's like low-key panic that this might send Bitcoin to below 20K.
And the funny thing is, a lot of people say that, including me, say that technical analysis is kind of like astrology for traders, right? And if you know what like a death cross, what it means is that well, specifically for Bitcoin, it means that like the 50-day moving average crosses below the 200-day moving average, and if such a thing occurs, Bitcoin can enter a bear market quite similar to like 2017, 2018, right? And I think people don't realize that you're talking about an asset that's not even 10 years old. So like all the history that you think you might know about it, it's not really there.
No.
And all these kind of speculations about movements, I think that the real movement is, do people want to use it? Does it have function? And kind of like, it's not as much technical analysis as people grant. It's people that create these patterns, but it's not the patterns that create the actions of people. That's what I tend to, what I'm trying to say.
Ultimately, I think the charts are just, visualizations of people's emotions and how people feel about the market in the moment. And just my thoughts on this death cross is that, people expect it to just happen as it happened before. And usually, when it comes to things that, people expect to happen, and if everyone thinks it's going to happen as such, it usually doesn't pan out that way. Because, people are going to act in a way that, they're going to, trade against it or do whatever they can to, benefit the most out of the situation that they feel everyone believes is going to happen. And then in reality, what then ends up happening is very different to what people imagined. So I don't know, people need to take these things with a grain of salt, especially technical analysis, because while it's an effective tool for decreasing the probabilities, but that's exactly what it is. It's still probabilities that you're dealing with, and very easily, what you expect to happen could just go in a completely different direction from what you would have expected, or what you deduced using their indicators.
Hmm. That's also how you see that kind of like this crash or dip, a large dip that we've been experiencing. Some people immediately dubbed it like we're entering a bear market again, but then you see this super strong buy support for Bitcoin around like I don't know what it is in dollars. It's like 30K in euro. That's kind of like the threshold that it's holding strong at.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a reason that it's not crashing more. It's because people don't want it to crash. Your TA might say whatever, but if there's a big enough buy support, your TA doesn't matter.
Exactly. So I don't think people are ready for a bear market just yet either. And I think a lot of people think there's a lot of life still left in this bull market.
Yeah.
So I think that's how it's gonna pan out. That we're still gonna have some leg ups. We might not see all-time highs. We might quite possibly could, but we might not. But that does not mean that we're in a bear market. A bear market looks quite different. Yeah. There's a lot more fear and uncertainty and doubt, and like the crypto space, quietens up quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's what you see a bunch of people are saying, like, yeah, it's a bull disguised as a bear, it's kind of both. There's a lot of doubt, but we are just experiencing a considerable dip within an upward trend,
right,
overall. And I think that's a good point to be made, and especially with kind of the adoption and like technical development that you see happen now, with like Jack Dorsey saying like, oh, we're going to look into the Lightning Network and to integrate it into Twitter, which is like that could very easily be one of the first steps of mass adoption, right?
That's pretty bullish. I mean, not that in its alone, but I feel like this type of adoption, and it really shows you what kind of a blank canvas blockchain technology is to be applied in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I think that's extreme. That alone, that sentiment alone, or idea alone, is super bullish for the space, because every day, more and more projects come out, more and more projects that are adding value to people's lives, and the space, and this over time is just incredibly bullish, because these are things people actively use every day. People actively use Aave, people actively use Compound, people actively use Maker. To do all kinds of things, people borrow in Aave and they start businesses, or they borrow in Aave and they start leverage trading, whether that's a good idea or not, but there's just like a lot of potential in the space, and people have to make the most of it. And I think Jack Dorsey, in saying that it's only a matter of time before Lightning Network is a part of Twitter. That's pretty bullish.
Yeah, and not just this is happening right now. Like it's very undercovered, like or very well, it's not heavily covered right now. But there's, for instance, a bill that passed in Germany which allows from the start of the 1st of July. Larger institutional investors to actually start trading in crypto.
Why isn't that being covered?
I don't know. It's one of the largest economies on the planet, and a massive regulation, a massive new opportunities, and also lots of new money that is about to, or not about to, possibly going to flow back into this market.
So maybe Merkel can come in hard in the G7 for the crypto squad.
Merkel with laser eyes. That would be a very nice thing to see in the coming month.
Yeah, it seems the more politicians who post laser eye photos, the worse the price becomes for Bitcoin. So we'll have to see. But on the Lightning Network, now El Salvador, who's recently made Bitcoin legal tender in the country, is also implementing Lightning Network in order to allow for, not only the government to accept cryptocurrencies, but also to facilitate automatic dollar transfer, like from Bitcoin to dollar transfer for custodians who would want dollar, because the US dollar is also legal tender in El Salvador.
Yeah.
So this is been the talk of the town, I think, in the last few days, because El Salvador's president has exposed himself as a big Bitcoiner. He's quite popular in his country, and now he's quite popular on Bitcoin, in Bitcoin Twitter to Bitcoin maxis, for taking this big step towards making Bitcoin legal tender in the country. And I think this is a huge step in the eyes of like Bitcoin maxis, because like this is what they want, right? Like for countries to be accepting Bitcoin as a currency, that can be used. And this is a big step, might cause a domino effect, and might, paint a sort of price floor for Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying here is completely true. What I think right now with the state of the market and all kind of the uncertainty that's going on right now, the more, I don't know if you can call it boring, it's not the most spicy news, but like these regulatory kind of changes that are being made, they're like the whispers of the bull market that are slowly coming through again. And also they have a much larger effect in the long term, because the more clarity there will be on the use and application and allowed way of enforcing intervention with cryptocurrencies, the more freedom there will also be, because the more clear the playing field is. Yeah, exactly. And it's just interesting to see how different governments approach this. And like, for example, this El Salvador's president, for example, was and basically made the official announcement on Twitter Spaces. And as they were accepting this in their the bill in their parliament, and there were the claps and everything, the president like raised up his phone towards the where he was watching this happen as well, and everyone on Twitter Spaces were listening and could hear this happening in real. They were actively involved, witnessing this. I think I can say historic happening. I think so as too. It happens, which is pretty cool. I just as someone who's been engaged in human rights academia for a while, I'm just suspicious of whether it's great to have this president be like a vocal proponent, like forward face, represent, I don't know what's the word, maybe just like proponent of Bitcoin. Obviously it's not, because he's a low-key like an authoritarian, and like although he's like wildly popular in his country, there's just like a lot of human rights issues that he's been actively engaged with. So just alongside the environmental FUD, this illicit activities FUD, that, and then this authoritarian coming in with the human rights violations, it's just like it's just very easy it's an easy parallel to be drawn. Like, exactly. Only those violating human rights are pro-Bitcoin. You don't want to read it, an article like that. Exactly. And it's very possible for these. Very easy for someone to write that, but so it's just because right now you just see a lot of Bitcoiners jumping like, let's move to El Salvador. This guy is awesome, laser eyes. There's probably more nuance to that, but the step in itself towards making a Bitcoin legal tender in the country is very interesting. And I just want to see like what it's probably like other countries are just waiting to see how does this actually impact El Salvador. How does this improve their situation in any which way. But I think a lot of other countries are lightening their stance. Like I think maybe like a few actors aren't cool with cryptos, like I don't know, like Trump was hating on Bitcoin the other day, but India, who was we've spoken about this, like previously wanted to ban Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, are now looking to make scrape that and make cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin just an asset class. Which is awesome. I mean, that is awesome. A nice switch up.
you know.
Yeah, I think there's overall, besides the technical analysis FUD,
Exactly.
there's overall a lot of very bullish signs going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Most
just not as
definitely.
cool sounding as PayPal's using crypto or something
know.
like that.
But yeah, people need to get into the boring stuff, because that's the like, you know, maybe some, I mean, quote unquote boring stuff. For us, I guess it's not that boring. Like, this is all
No.
very interesting, and I'm sure it's interesting to a lot more people. But you know, this is where, like, you know, if you have an understanding of these things, like that, just it will better inform your opinion.
Completely agree. It's you know the law, and then you know the playing field, and I think that's a very big thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, and especially now when the laws are not very defined, you gotta stay on your toes.
Yeah.
Stay on your toes, like, and I think what's like a huge thing in the crypto blockchain space is just constant learning. People are very much about constant learning, and you have to, because things are constantly evolving.
Definitely, and that's why you have to keep in touch with the Block Exploring podcast. So
yeah, exactly. Stay exploring the block with us. You know.
Yeah. So I think that was it for this week.
Mm-hmm.
We will see you in the next episode soon.
Cool. Take
Have
it
a nice
easy.
week. Stay bullish.